right, you're watching Live Now. I'm Austin Westfall. We've been tracking the situation in the Middle East closely. I was reading, really, some updates from the Wall Street Journal as of late. We've been talking about report after report, many news outlets giving clues and indicating that President Trump is, in fact, weighing an initial limited strike to force Iran into a nuclear deal. And if authorized, many news outlets are saying that the action could come within days. The Wall Street Journal saying that earlier. They say that the president is still considering a range of military options, though. He still prefers diplomacy. Trump says that the U.S. may make a deal with Iran, quote, probably in the next 10 days. So there's still some uncertainties about this. Military assets, by the way, continuing to build up in the Middle East as the U.S. opens up its options if it chooses to do something militarily against Iran and its regime. Let's bring in Cliff May. Cliff is the president and the founder of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Cliff, what we've been doing lately is we've been having the audience send in their questions about these very complex issues. After all, a lot of people have questions at home, and it's our public service to get those questions answered. I want to start off here with Ethan in New Orleans. Ethan saying, what military assets does the U.S. have now in the region regarding a possible strike in Iran? I mean, Cliff, we've got quite a bit of military hardware out there, don't we?
Oh, enormous. You've got carrier groups, the Gerald Ford is the largest aircraft carrier in the world. You've got an array of different planes that can strike you. It's really massive and enormous. And it means that the president has quite a few options in terms of how he uses these assets. And my guess is that there are strike plans from which he can choose if he decides to, and if there's no deal, as it were. And anyhow, I'll stop there. I won't try to list all the assets unless you really want me to.
Oh, there's so many assets. I wouldn't ask you to name every single one of them, but here's a bit of an idea of some of the hardware that they've got in the area. Of course, the one that many of us have been talking about is the USS Gerald R. Ford. It's been moved from the Caribbean. It was over in the Caribbean when the U.S. was stocking up over there, when the Venezuela situation was going on. Now it's on its way to the Middle East. At last check, I was reading some open source intel feeds. They said that they saw the Gerald R. Ford somewhere around Morocco, so certainly en route to the area. Cliff, the Journal says that an initial strike would be designed to pressure Tehran into an agreement, but it would fall short of a full-scale attack that could inspire a major retaliation. As things stand tonight, Thursday night, does it feel like the U.S. is poised to do something militarily, regardless of how these current negotiations play out?
I think so, unless the negotiations lead, and I think President Trump would like this, to the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader, which is a euphemism for longtime dictator, says, okay, I don't want us to get hit, and this would be catastrophic for us, for our revolution. Therefore, I am going to make a deal, and make a deal would have to be a euphemism for I'm going to cave and agree to the demands that President Trump has made on us. I think that's very difficult for him to do. I don't think it's impossible. What he would say is probably, there's only been two supreme leaders of the Islamic Republic of Iran since 1979. The first one, when he ended the war with Iran, he said, I am going to drink from the poisoned chalice. Or in other words, I'm going to take a drink of poison because this war has to stop with Iran. Something like that could happen. He would call it revolutionary flexibility. He would come up with some name for it. But it's not easy for him to do. His life is dedicated to the Islamic Revolution. The Islamic Revolution is dedicated to, we know, death to Israel, death to America. Very hard for him to do what the president is demanding, give up terrorism, give up the quest for nuclear weapons, for intercontinental ballistic missiles that can deliver those weapons anywhere in the world. Stop killing his own people. He's killed tens of thousands of unarmed protesters over recent days, and he's still doing so.
So let's get to Brandon. Brandon sending this in from Yucca Valley. If the United States did strike Iran, What would they target? More nuclear facilities or energy facilities? What are they looking to strike to get Iran to want to stop being a nuclear threat? Cliff, is our understanding that a potential initial strike this time around would look a little similar to what we saw during the 12-day war?
It gets back to a little bit to what you were saying before. There could be an initial strike just to make sure Ayatollah Khamenei understands this is not a bluff. The president's serious. Are you sure you don't want to make a deal? Again, a deal being meet my demands. That could happen. It could be a strike and then a pause. After that, the president is looking at what they call target banks. In other words, a lot of different things that he could strike. I can't tell you what he's going to decide. If he does decide, I can give you some ideas. One is, yes, there may still be nuclear facilities that he wants to hit to make sure that there is no development of a nuclear weapon by this regime anytime over the next few years. Two, he may want to destroy intercontinental ballistic missiles and the launch pads, even more important, for those missiles. The Israelis would love that to happen because they threaten Israel most of all. But if they're intercontinental ballistic missiles, again, they threaten everybody. The Israelis might be asked to do some of the work on this themselves. I'm pretty sure they would agree if possible. The president might want to hit the headquarters of those institutions that have been massacring innocent Iranians. He said the help is on its way. What would those be? The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and the Basiji. And the Basijis are kind of like the thugs. They're sort of like Islamic brown shirts, if that makes sense to you. So those are some of the targets he might decide to do. He might decide, and I'll just put this out there too, to say, okay, if we're going to hit them, we're going to hit them hard. That means they will, after we're finished, they will have, for the foreseeable future, no offensive capabilities and perhaps no defensive capabilities. Keep in mind, they don't need defensive capabilities if they are not threatening their neighbors.
Let's talk about Iran's capabilities. Axios' Barak Ravid has this been translated from a statement that Iran sent to the U.S. They sent this to the UN. So this is an Iranian statement translated to the UN. They say, if we are attacked, all bases, facilities, and assets of the hostile force in the region will be considered legitimate targets within the framework of Iran's defensive response. The United States will bear full and direct responsibility for any unforeseen and uncontrollable consequences. So, Cliff, let's say that a U.S. operation does trigger a retaliation from Iran. How much clarity do we have on what the Iranian military is actually capable of?
I think we have a lot of clarity on it. I think the U.S. does in terms of military intelligence, and I'm pretty sure the Israelis have, because they do a lot of work on this, and we know from the last war how accurate their information is, and they're sharing that, you can bet, with the U.S. So the U.S. has what the Israelis have. So I think there's a lot of knowledge. This is a threat, but they've made threats before. They have threatened. In fact, I think they've tried to kill President Trump. He knows that. He may want to see there are consequences for that. That could be part of the equation. They've threatened to sink aircraft carriers and other ships. This is the reason why early on in the strikes, the offensive capabilities of this regime the U.S. might want to diminish them very, very rapidly. Now, you can't stop I suppose, a terrorist with a suicide bomb strapped to his vest from going into to an embassy or a consulate. Or you can stop them, but they might try. But in terms of the missiles they might use to hit U.S. forces overseas, we do have anti-missile systems. And we can even better is to knock out those missiles, those offensive capabilities, as quickly as possible.
So let's get.
And I don't think Khamenei is. I understand what he's doing. I don't think he's helping himself by threatening the U.S. and by threatening Trump in this way. I don't think that's as useful as he may believe it is.
Yeah. Andy sending this in. Andy's in South Carolina. I think he asks a question that's on a lot of people's mind. I think a lot of people want some clarity on this. Will there be boots on the ground from U.S. troops or not? What's the likelihood that the U.S. puts troops on the ground in Iran proper, Cliff?
I don't think there's any strong likelihood of that whatsoever. I don't think the president wants to do that or will do that. I think one of the things that maybe giving the president pause is he would love to see a strike that resulted in this regime collapsing. And that's harder to do because there is no well-organized opposition, armed opposition in the country, in Iran. When you have a seriously repressive regime like this one, they kill those in the opposition. They kill those who might become a part of the opposition to make it impossible for that to happen. The only possibility that I can imagine of boots on the ground would be special operators, special forces. There are possibly missions that special forces could conduct that would be useful. Keep in mind, that's what we just saw in Venezuela. Special forces, special operators went in. They made it. They killed a lot. They blinded and deafened the Cuban bodyguards and killed, I think, several dozen of them. And they arrested Nicolas Maduro and brought him back to a jail cell in Brooklyn, New York. So you could have something like that. Do I think they're going to seize Ayatollah Khamenei and bring him back to the same jail cell with Maduro? I don't. But one could be surprised, I suppose.
You know, you never know where things are going to go. That's something I've learned in recent years. Let's ask a little bit about Iran's network, if you will. Iran and Russia, they've been conducting joint drills as the U.S. has brought these naval assets closer to the region. Let's say that the U.S. does do something militarily in Iran, Cliff. How tight is Russia with Iran? And in your opinion, is there a threshold at which Russia would be compelled to actually get involved?
So two different things. One is, yes, Russia and Tehran, Moscow and Tehran are closely tied. We have Shahed drones going from Tehran, from Iran to Russia to be used to kill Ukrainians. We have a Shahed drone factory made by in Iranian design in Russia. But no, I don't think Putin doesn't, in the midst of the war he is trying to fight and has been fighting, it'll be 4 years on February 24th, next Tuesday, against Ukraine. I don't see him having the resources, even if he wanted to, and I don't think he necessarily wants to come back to say, okay, I got my guys there. I'm going to come to your defense militarily. At the UN, of course. There is what we have been long calling at my think tank, Foundation for Defense of Democracies, FDD, an axis of aggressors, and that means Moscow, Tehran, Beijing, and Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea. They are all working together in various ways, but there's only so far they're going to go, and I don't think Putin has the bandwidth or the military assets in place or to give any substantial aid to Ayatollah Khamenei at this point.
You know, Bailey is on the same wavelength as you. Bailey in Minneapolis says, what are the regional implications that could arise if the U.S. enters a war with Iran, specifically with China, Russia, or North Korea? We don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Obviously, there's nothing to indicate that the U.S. will enter a war with Iran, but let's talk a little bit more. If we can expand, I asked you about Russia. Let's expand a little bit more on the China and North Korea pieces of this. How close are those countries with Iran?
Again, Bailey has named Iran, China, Russia, North Korea, the axis of aggressors. And China does support Iran. They've been sending materials to help Iran restore its ballistic missile capabilities. North Korea, we believe, has supplied various technology. They're all together against the United States. Very clearly, they want to diminish the U.S.'s role in the world. China certainly wants to be the preeminent power, with Russia, North Korea, Tehran as kind of junior partners. But I don't think, again, I don't think if the U.S. decides to strike Iran, and I don't consider it a war, I consider it a strike, it could last more than a few days, though, that they're going to come in militarily. They will help Tehran build back, maybe build back better, if Tehran does survive. Tehran often takes, the Ayatollah Khamenei in the past has taken the view that if they survive, that means they've won. That's all they have to do is survive. But at a certain point it becomes, I don't know if you remember, Austin, Monty Python had the Black Knight. And the Black Knight's in a fight and he loses his arm. He says, that's all right, I'm still fighting. And then he loses his other arm and then a leg. It's only a flesh wound, and another. at a certain point, it becomes clear that no, they're not prevailing. They are becoming crippled. And if they become crippled, what would that mean? Well, it should mean that they decide we are going to concentrate on our own population, which is impoverished right now in a way it has never been. That's one of the reasons they have been protesting. But it's very hard for a revolutionary Islamic regime to make that kind of pivot to say, let's take care of our own people. Again, a truce. They could say, let's take a pause. What I said before, drink from the poisoned chalice. Not impossible, but probably unlikely. The Ayatollah, I think, believe he's 86 years old at this point. This has been his life's work. Now, this is not something else that could happen. Could somebody else say it's time for the Ayatollah to go? And for the sake of the country, we have to come to terms with the U.S. That's just realistic. Could happen. Not so easy to happen. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard has been very loyal to him. That's what it's set up for. It's separate from the Iranian military. Maybe there's some colonel in the military who thinks you could take over. Keep in mind what happened in Venezuela. Maduro's taken out. He has a number two, Delcy Rodriguez. The president says essentially to Delcy Rodriguez, if you cooperate with me, you can stay in your office, but you have to cooperate with me. And as soon as you do not, it'll be very bad for you. Could something like that happen? It is possible. Does the CIA know of some colonel or somebody who would like to make a deal if the Ayatollah wasn't in power? Maybe. Do the Israelis? Maybe. Again, this is all above my pay grade and yours.
Cliff Mays, the president of the FDD, always good to check in. Thanks.